Hello, class. Now let's proceed to the unification of current thinking in different strands of disciplines for development materials for the development of skills. Before we start, I will play a short video clip of a native speaker, then I'll ask each of you what skills of communication he did and list what you have noticed in the video. Then send it to me via email. Before we proceed to our discussion, our learning objectives for this lesson are: number 1, students will apply the use of 4 skills to achieve proficiency as a reader, listener, writer, and speaker. Number 2, students will engage in different activities that enhance their 4 skills of communication. For the learning outcome, at the end of this discussion, students will develop a learning material with integrated 4 skills. Next, we will tackle the conversion factor number 1, which is beliefs and myths about the native speaker model and their consequences. The native speaker myth still seems to persist among teachers, learners, parents, and other stakeholders such as government officials, syllabus designer, inspectors, decision makers in schools, materials developers, and publishers. The assumptions are that native speaker performance provided in the materials is the ideal and that learners should become able to comprehend and simulate and perform likewise. Listening to or reading non-native speakers' English, including that produced by learners and teachers, could have detrimental effect on learning. For example, we have just received an email from a researcher in Iran reporting concerns that the absence of native speaker teachers of English is leading to the development of a variety of Iranian Pidgin English. Analysis of spoken English reveal distinctive differences between written English and spoken English. Materials writers and publishers attempt to incorporate some of the typical features of authentic real-life spoken interactions, but comparison of curse book interactions and authentic conversation has revealed marked differences. What is significant is that, as a result, teachers feel that their English is not good enough to tend to rely heavily on the use of tapes or affordable equivalents. Teachers are also aware of the expectation of learners, parents, and other stakeholders. It seems to us that the argument that non-native speaker English contaminates learning cannot explain the fact that the emphasis on native speaker English since the audiolingual method era in the 1960s has not prevented learners from having accents or making grammatical mistakes. The native speaker myth seems to hush the teachers and learners in relation to the 4 skills, even though the teachers and learners are unrecognized best resources for such interactions vital for language acquisition. Now let's proceed to the conversion factor number 2, the process and product-based approach. The distinction between process and product-based instruction is often made especially in relation to so-called receptive skills, such as listening and reading. Materials for teaching receptive skills tend to rely on task-like activities. because most of the processes in listening and reading happen as a mental operation that are not amenable to observation. Therefore, researchers have to measure the success of comprehension, the product, indirectly by looking at the scores of comprehension tests such as comprehension questions, gut feeling, or true or false. For further understanding about process and product-based approach, materials tend to use activities that are likely to involve the target skills, such as putting pictures in a correct sequence to see if learners can follow instruction, or asking the learners to summarize the writer's or speaker's opinion to see if they are able to infer what is not obvious in a listening or reading text. These common activities are focused on the product of listening or reading, thus they are sometimes called product-based approaches. The fact that product-based tests can be created easily may explain why they dominate the majority of skills activities. However, the problem with product-based approaches is that the learners do not normally receive any feedback on what caused misunderstanding nor support for how they can be helped in their future attempts. The product-based approaches also tend to overlook the very fact that in real life, listening or reading, we do not listen or read intensively to get correct answers, right? Instead, we have intended goals for listening or reading, and we achieve a sufficient interpretation based on how our own personality and past experience necessary for the goals to be achieved. Process-based approaches, on the other hand, pay attention to the process that listeners or readers go through and try to support them prior to, while, and after listening or reading. There are many suggestions how such help could be offered. Go 2010 and Vandergrift in Go 2012 advocate encouraging learners' autonomy in becoming strategic listeners or readers. Go 2010 gave example that offers sequences in listening involving self-appraisal and self-regulation all through listening. Phil 2008 and 2012 suggest how conventional product approaches can be modified to include stages of reflection and discussion and repeated listening. Now let's move on to conversion factor number 3, L1 acquisition. Listening is the most fundamental of all the skills. Most of the literature on methodology and materials for skills instruction treats the four skills separately. The sequence in which the four skills are presented seems to be either following the categorization of receptive skills versus productive skills, or spoken versus written. I would like to present a new angle and strongly argue that the listening skills deserves much more attention as fundamental skill that supports the other skills. Let us explain by looking at what we understand about the listening process. L2 listening remains the least researched of all four language skills. In order to teach L2 listening more effectively, teachers need a richer understanding of the listening process or a narrow focus on the right answer to comprehension question. Listening is often perceived by language learner as the most difficult language skill to learn and consequently can become a source of anxiety for L2 learners. For our IFVL, in Philippians 4 verse 9, It says that whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into good practice, and God of peace will be with you. As a future educator, we must put in good practice what we have learned using the four skills in our lives, and God will prosper us as long as we are using it in a right way. Because God knows everything, since He's always with us. That's why, class, I want you to keep that always in your mind. I hope you learned from this topic. Thank you and God bless.